What's up, Velocity? How are you guys doing today? Well, thank you. Good to hear. Well, like Mike just said, my name is Douglas Ponce, although I go by the nickname Dougie, so you guys can call me that. And I am one of the senior boys here at Christ Journey Church. And yeah, shout out to my seniors. And I have the honor and really just the blessing to come here tonight and speak to you guys. And I already know it's not me speaking, it's God speaking. So I'm excited for the message He has for you guys today. And so I want to start off by telling you guys a funny story about me. And, I hate to be that guy who only talks about that one thing that they're good at, but I have to talk to you guys about wrestling. So I am a wrestler. I wrestle for Coral Gables Senior High School. I've been wrestling for 4 years now. So I like to think that I'm pretty good. But this weekend, we actually had a tournament called GMAC. And it's a really big tournament here in Florida. All the schools come from, up north. It's a big tournament. And so there was a lot of schools there, and there was a lot of big competitions. And about 20 minutes before my first match, I'm checking the bracket to see who I'm gonna beat. And I see the name Brevin Balmaceda. Now, for those of you who don't wrestle or know nothing about wrestling, that names mean nothing to you, but for wrestlers, the name Brevin Balmaceda is a big deal because Brevin Balmaceda is the number 2 wrestler in the country of the United States. Yeah, not just Florida, the number 2 wrestler in the United States. And so when I saw that name, I got scared. And this feeling of helplessness just overwhelmed me. And I just looked to my teammates and I looked to my coach and I was like, I started to tell myself, I can't do this. I can't do this. I can't go up there. I'm going to get destroyed. I can't. I am too weak. But obviously I had to go up, and so I did, and long story short, I got destroyed as expected. I think it was only about a 20-second match. It was not pretty. And I think it's pretty safe to say that I was feeling weak, I was feeling helpless, and I think that's a feeling that a lot of us can relate to, I think there's many times in our lives where we feel helpless like that, where we just feel like, oh my gosh, I can't do this. And we adopt that mentality of, I can't. And so tonight we're going to be talking about that. And we're going to be talking about weaknesses, especially 3 types of weaknesses that I think that we face as human beings all the time. Mental weakness, spiritual weakness, and physical weakness. And so we've been going through the book of Judges, and the series is called Cycles. And we're going to be looking at Gideon's story. And Gideon is a judge, of course. And so, to set the scene for you guys, as you guys know, in Cycles, we have a period of time where the Israelites are saved from God, from a judge, and then there's a time period of peace of the land. And so, there was that peace over the land, but over that peace, the Israelites had once again turned away from God. And so, God had once again given them to the hands of the enemies. This time we're looking at the Midianites. Now these Midianites, they are no joke. They are like today's Brevin Balmacedas. Imagine one Brevin Balmaceda. There's a bunch of Brevin Balmacedas now. And it says in the Bible that they actually took over the land. And they didn't just take it over. They slaughtered every single living being that they saw. No living thing was spared. That goes as far as the soil, the cattle, the donkeys. Everything was destroyed. And the Israelites were forced to hide in shelters. And so, where we pick up our story, here we see Gideon, and this is what it says. Judges 6:11. The angel of the Lord came and sat down under the oak in Ophrah that belonged to Joash the Abiezrite, where his son Gideon was threshing wheat in a winepress to keep it from the Midianites. When the angel of the Lord appeared to Gideon, he said, "The Lord is with you, you mighty warrior." "Pardon me, my lord," Gideon replied, "but if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? Where are all his wonders that our ancestors told us about when they said, did not the Lord bring us out of Egypt? But now the Lord has abandoned us and given us into the hand of the Midian." The Lord turned to him and said, Go in the strength you have and save Israel out of the Midian's hand. Am I not sending you?" "Pardon me, my lord," Gideon replied, "but how can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my family." The Lord answered, "I will be with you, and you will strike down all the Midianites, leaving none alive." So, a judge is supposed to be someone who's supposed to rise up and save the Israelites. And here we see Gideon hiding in a wine press. He's scared, rightfully so. The Midianites had just taken over. There's this great enemy. And when God tells him, hey, I'm gonna use you to save your people, the first thing Gideon says is, whoa, I can't do this. Not me, Lord. See, we see Gideon start to doubt himself, a mental weakness that a lot of us face in our own lives, where we think that we can't do anything, that we have doubts about ourselves, about our own worth. We allow our vulnerabilities and our insecurities to fill our head, so much to the point where we just want to hide from the rest of the world. And that's what Gideon's doing. But I want you guys to pay close attention to the first thing God tells Gideon. Because God doesn't go and say, hey, you coward, rise up. No. He looks at Gideon hiding, and he says, you mighty warrior. It's the first thing he says to us. And so what that tells me, what that should tell all of you guys today, is that God sees more in you than you see in yourselves. See, where you see mistakes, where you see failure within yourself, where you see vulnerabilities, where you see insecurities, where you just want to hide from the rest of the world because you think that you can't, you think you are too weak, God says, no, you are a mighty warrior. He sees value in you, even when you think you don't have any values for yourself. God sees more in us than we see in ourselves. Gideon was saying, hey, I am the weakest in my family. I'm the weakest in my whole tribe. I can't do this. But when we can't do things, God can. And the second thing I see in this scripture passage is that Gideon was underestimating himself. He was underestimating himself. He was underestimating his worth. He was underestimating his own strength. And that's something we all also do a lot in ourselves. We underestimate ourselves in many situations. But you see, the thing is, when we underestimate ourselves, we're actually underestimating God. And that's not because we have some type of power within ourselves. That's not because we have some type of hidden strength that we can unleash at will. No. It's underestimating ourselves. Sorry, when we underestimate ourselves, we're underestimating God. And that's so because God had told Gideon, and he tells us today, that he is going to be with us. Like he says, am I not sending you? Go in the strength you have. I am with you. And we know this to be true. We know God is with us, yet we still underestimate ourselves. But when we underestimate ourselves, we underestimate God. Because God tells us he's going to be with us. And I didn't say this earlier, but my main point for tonight, and what I want you guys to take home more than anything, is that our weaknesses reveal God's strength. And that comes with mental weaknesses too. Where we don't think we can, where we feel mentally weak, where we have doubts about ourselves, God's strength pushes us through, and he says, no, you are a mighty warrior. No, I'm going to be with you. As the story progresses, Gideon says, okay, God, if this is true, if I'm going to save Israel by my hand through your strength, then prove it to me. And so he gives God a test, and God delivers. He answers the test, and then Gideon's like, okay, God, I understand. What do you want me to do? And so the Midianites did not worship God. The Midianites had their own god called Baal, a false god. And God had told Gideon that he needs Gideon to go ahead and destroy all the altars that they have substituted that were meant to worship Baal. And so Gideon says, okay, God. And he goes ahead and he does this. And when he does this, as you can imagine, the Midianites are pissed. They are not happy with this. And so they all rally up, they gather together, and they march down to Gideon's house where his dad answers the door, and they demand Gideon to go outside and pay for his consequences. And his dad is able to save Gideon. He says, hey, okay, if your God is so real, if your God is so powerful, then can he handle him? And so the Midianites say, fair enough. And they go ahead and they change Gideon's name to something that translates to today, to let Baal contend with him. And they march away. But you see, Gideon saw this. And when he saw this large army going to his house and demanding him, he started to get scared. And he started to doubt God. So much so, and here we pick up in Judges 6:36. And it says, Gideon said to God, if you will save Israel by my hand, as you have promised, look, I will place a wool fleece on the threshing floor. If there is dew only on the fleece and all the ground is dry, then I will know that you will save Israel by my hand, as you said. And that is what happened. Gideon rose early the next day. He squeezed the fleece and wrung out the dew, a bowl full of water. Then Gideon said to God, do not be angry with me. Let me make just one more request. Allow me one more test with the fleece, but this time make the fleece dry, and let the ground be covered with dew. That night God did so. Only the fleece was dry, all the ground was covered with dew. Now, like I told you guys, Gideon had already tested God. And here we see Gideon test God not one more time, but 2 more times. And now Gideon has tested God for a total of 3 times, which, by the way, in the Bible, it's a sin to test God. It says in Deuteronomy that we are not to test God. And here we see Gideon not do it not once, not twice, but 3 times. But before we go ahead and point the finger at Gideon, we need to take a step back because, let's be honest, how many times have we tested God? How many times have we doubted him? Have we questioned him? Even though he's already revealed himself to us, even though he's made it perfectly clear that he is speaking to us, and yet we still do that. It's a spiritual weakness, and it's something that a lot of us go through. But I don't want you guys to focus on that. I want you guys to focus on God's reaction to this, because at that moment, God could have easily said, you know what, Gideon? You're doubting me. You're going to test me. You're going to question my power, my will, after I've already made it clear to you. I'm going to go ahead and find someone else to do this job. Or he could have just said, you know what? I'm going to leave you guys in the hands of the Midianites. Good luck. Or, very simple, he could have just killed Gideon. Just for questioning him, just for testing him, just going against him. But that's not the type of God we serve. What God shows here is that God shows patience in our weaknesses. He showed patience with Gideon. And he shows patience with us today because our weaknesses reveal God's strength. And one of God's strengths is that he has patience. Something that I know I struggle with a lot, and I think a lot of you guys do too. God doesn't leave us. He doesn't abandon us. He stays with us. He's patient with us. And not just patient with us, but he also walks with us in our weaknesses. When we feel spiritually weak, when we have those doubts, those questions, those tests, God doesn't just leave us. He waits with us, holding our hand and walking with us, showing patience. And thank God. Thank God we serve a God that does that. Spiritual weakness, because our weaknesses reveal God's strength. After this happens, the story goes on, and Gideon says, okay, God, you've made it clear. Now it's time to go to war. Now it's time for him to rise up against the Midianites and finally take back the land of the Israelites. Take back their soil, take back their animals, take back, their lives. And so he goes on, he rallies up the troops. And it says that there's a total of 32,000 men that Gideon is able to rise up for his army. 32,000 Israelites are by his side, ready to go to war. But we're in the series called Cycles. And more than anything, God wanted them to turn back to him. And he knew that if they had won that battle with 32,000 men, that the Israelites would have not turned back to God. They would have said, we won because of how many people we had. We won because of our own strength. And so God didn't want that, because God wanted them to know that it was him who was going to save them. And so God tells Gideon, hey, your army's too big. You got to make it weaker. I need it to be smaller. And so Gideon goes up to his troops and he says, anyone who is scared, you may leave. And from 32,000 men, it says 22,000 men leave. Now we're left with 10,000 men. From 32,000 to 10,000 men. Now imagine being Gideon and seeing just 22,000 people leave your side when you're about to go to war with the biggest enemy you've ever faced in your life. But God says, no, it's still too much. Still too much. 22,000 people left. And so Gideon says, okay, God. And he takes his remaining 10,000 men, he takes them to a river, and he tells them to drink. And everyone who drank like a dog, like literally like a dog, was told that they could stand the army. The weakest of the weak. And from 10,000 men, Gideon's army is left with only 300 men. From 32,000 men to 300 men. It's easy to... It does not say how many people were in the Midianites' army, but I imagine the Midianites had way more than 300 men. As you can imagine, they're unprepared for this battle. They're too weak for this battle. They are physically too weak for this battle. But I want you guys to check out what happens. This is the game plan. In Judges 7:16, dividing the 300 men into 3 companies, he placed trumpets and empty jars in the hands of all of them, with torches inside. Watch me, he told them. Follow my lead. When I get to the edge of the camp, do exactly as I do. When I and all who are with me blow our trumpets, then from all around the camp, blow yours and shout, for the Lord and for Gideon. Gideon and the 100 men with him reached the edge of the camp at the beginning of the middle watch, just after they had changed the guard. They blew their trumpets and broke the jars that were in their hands. The 3 companies blew the trumpets and smashed the jars. Grasping the torches in their left hands and holding in their right hands the trumpets they were told to blow, they shouted, a sword for the Lord and for Gideon. While each man held his position around the camp, all the Midianites ran, crying out as they fled. When the 300 trumpets sounded, the Lord caused the men throughout the camp to turn on each other with their own swords. And then it says that the army didn't just leave, they ran as far away as possible. They literally went, they were there, they went all the way over there. They ran out crying. Now, keep in mind, this was the army that had taken over their land and had slaughtered every single living thing they saw. This was a powerful army. Here they are crying out, running away in fear of their lives. But they only had 300 men. How could this happen? And when it came to the biggest battle of their lives, they didn't have swords or any heavy artillery. No, they had empty jars with torches and trumpets. I think it's pretty safe to say that they were not ready for this battle. They were unprepared. They were too weak for this battle. See, but our weaknesses reveal God's strength. And so we need to realize that our battles are won on God's strength, not on our own. Because we can't, but He can. And then we need to recognize that, just as Gideon's army did, they shouted for the Lord and for Gideon. We need to recognize that we will never win any type of battle on our own strength. We can't. We are too weak. But our weaknesses reveal God's strength. And when we can't do these things, God can. Now, Gideon's story doesn't end there. But that's as far as I'm going to go with Gideon's story. And I encourage you guys tonight to read the Bible and finish the rest of the story. See what else God speaks to you with that. But I want to take a step back now and look at the bigger picture. And because some of you guys might be saying, okay, Dougie, I understand this is a great story and all, but this happened many years ago. Like, stuff like this doesn't happen today. Like, what does this mean for me? What does this mean for us? I'm sure you might be also asking, why did God pick Gideon? Why did God pick such a weak man? Why did God pick such a weak army? Because Gideon was mentally weak, spiritually weak, physically weak. But the thing about God is, despite our weaknesses, God still calls us. He still calls us. And that's the thing about God. That's the thing about His character that's so good. Is that when God made us in His image as children of God, as His children, He doesn't just see us for our talents, for our strengths, our abilities, the things that we're good at, the things that we like to show to everyone else. No. God sees you, and He sees value in every single part of you, including your weaknesses. He loves you so much that He wants to use every single part of you, not just the things that you want to show, only the things that you're comfortable with. No. That part of you that you want to hide in a wine press, that you want to hide from everyone else, that you think is too weak, that you think has no value to it, He wants to use that part too, because He loves you so much. He wants to use every single part of you. Now, some of you guys might be thinking to yourselves, not me. You know, it's great. I hear what you're saying, but not me. God will never call me. God will never use me like that. God cannot use my weaknesses. He's never going to call upon me. What are you talking about? Well, what if I told you that you're wrong and that He already has? And the Great Commission in Matthew 28, verse 18 to 20, right before Jesus had left, He told His disciples, and by the way, disciple means follower of Christ. So for all of us here, if we believe in God and believe in Lord Jesus Christ as our Savior, then we are disciples of Christ. And He told us to go and make disciples of all nations. He has called us. God has called us. But how many of us are doing this? Because I know, me personally, I don't do this every day. And I don't do this all the time. And if I'm being honest, a lot of the time it's because I think I'm too weak. God, not me. I can't do this. No, not me, God. I'm the weakest in my family. I'm too weak. I have no social status. Or we say, God, not me. I don't go to church every Sunday. I don't read my Bible every day. So I can't do this. I'm not spiritual enough, God. Or we say, God, look at me. I'm the shortest person in my class. I'm physically weak. I can't do this. But it's not about us. It's not about our weaknesses. Because if it was up to us, if it was up to our own strengths, we would never get anything done. Our weaknesses reveal God's strength. And so our weaknesses should not be an excuse not to do what God has called us to do. Because it's never going to be us doing it. It's going to be God doing it through us. It's going to be God using His strength and our weaknesses to get it done. So then how? How do we go about this? How can we allow God to use His strength? How can we allow God to reveal His strength and our weaknesses? Well, there are three simple things that I think we see in Gideon's story. Number one is surrender. Number two is trust. And number three is say yes. You see, the first thing we need to do to get this done, to allow God to use our weaknesses, is that we have to give it to Him. We have to surrender our weaknesses to God and say, God, I'm not good at this. I have doubts about this. Lord, I don't think I'm strong enough to do this, but I'm giving it to you, God. And I am then trusting you. Because you can't just give it to Him and then continue the doubt and continue the weakness to fill your head, to allow the enemy to get inside your head. Because he will. You need to trust Him with it. God, I'm giving you my weaknesses, and I am trusting that you will do what you can do. And then the most important step is that we need to say yes. See, because God isn't looking for the person who's the strongest or the fastest or has the most Christian accolades. He's not looking for the person who's reading their Bible every day and going to church every Sunday. Not saying that those are bad things. I mean, those are good things. I encourage that. The Bible encourages that. That's how we grow in faith. But more than anything, God is looking for the person who's going to say yes. Like, yes, God. Lord, I don't know if I can do it. I have all these weaknesses, but I'm giving it to you. I'm trusting you for them, and I'm saying yes. Use me, Lord. And when we do those three things, guys, I promise you, it is guaranteed that you will see God using your weaknesses to reveal His strength. And not just to you, but to everyone around you, to the entire world. And it's not, and if you guys need more proof of this, you can look all throughout the Bible. This message speaks all throughout the Bible. David versus Goliath. David was physically too weak, but God used his weaknesses to reveal His strength. Or how about Moses? When God called upon Moses, Moses was like, Lord, I can't speak. I'm bad at speaking. I can't do this. I can't go to the king and demand these things. But once again, where he was too weak, God wasn't. God was strong and used His strength to reveal Himself. Or how about Thomas? When Jesus comes, Thomas doubts, spiritually weak. See, thing is, we're going to go through these weaknesses. We're humans. We're going to feel mentally weak at times. We're going to feel spiritually weak at times. We're going to feel physically weak at times. We are going to feel weak. The question is, what are you going to do with that weakness? Are you going to allow God to use His strength? Are you going to allow God to reveal Himself through it? Are you going to surrender it to Him? Trust Him with it? And most importantly, are you going to say yes when He calls us? And He already has. You guys pray with me.